Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuce 85, and we are, of course, coming to you live from the FTN Network, where we do fantasy, DFS, season-long prop betting, prize picks, underdog, etc., etc., etc. We do it all. We offer it all. If you're not a member of FTN Daily or FTNBets.com just yet, what are you doing? Get on those sites, check it out, sign up for a month. This is the perfect time to do it. See what all the fuss is about. Mike Kutry, who is the prop master when it comes to college basketball, our chief content officer, Mike Randall, who is absolutely crushing it with his bets as well. And it was another solid evening in the FTN community when it comes to DFS. There was a few hiccups here, crazy slate, but overall we hit on some very, very nice plays, and I saw a few green screens and people talking about how it was a good night. And overall, I think we're going to continue to do so. The NBA All-Star break is wrapping up, which means we'll probably see a slight decrease in some of these contests here for at least another week or two of February. As we get into March and conference tournaments, you'll see those prize pools and those contests seep back up. Right now, we have a massive amount of contests available for tomorrow/today, depending on when you are watching this. Definitely want to get involved. Eat up any of that overlay. It is a 12-game slate, which is what we're going to get into here. Just to run down the contest, that $18 GPP with 2,200 people, nearly 23, 10K to first. You also have the bracket qualifier at the $95 level, which is number 41 for the Mania. Spots are starting to get gobbled up. Chances are going to be running out. Still plenty, though, if you are playing and wanting to get in. The $95 queue tends to be a little bit more of a favorable one. 250 is a little wacky, right? The 30 is just so large. You got to make a perfect lineup. But the 95, that is the sweet spot when it comes to trying to queue for the Mania. That's my opinion, at least. I have been the closest in the 95, and we have seen some really good wins from other FTN members here throughout. There's also the Mini Max 1K to first. That's still going on. 1K to first, $33. And then I don't see the 222 yet, but there is a large 333, and I can count like that. 83 entrants. It's 5K to first, called the Moneyball Special. So that is the big one there. 5K to first, 3K second, 2K to third and fourth, and then 1K for fifth and sixth. A pretty flat payout, which is what we've only ever asked for in DFS, and we are getting it. And if you really have the cojones and the bankroll to get it done, there's a 4-entrant $555 GBP, 2K to first. I don't know about that, but hey, it's there if you want it. If you're new to the show, thank you for checking us out. What we do here, besides just talking about DFS, we like to chat. We like to shoot the breeze. We'll talk about some randomness. Last night's was Marshall Henderson. We talk about prize picks. We talk about prop betting opportunities, straight bet opportunities, everything and anything about college basketball. We're here. We're going to talk it through. And we do come to you live 3 nights a week, and soon to be 4 and 5 nights a week as we get into March and the March Madness. I will be covering not only March Madness, the tournament, the big dance, but also NIT, CBI, CIT, and any other secondary tournament that there is that we can bet money on or play DFS for. You can rest assured that content will be delivered to you in a nice, neat little package. In peak efficiency is what we do here. If you're a returner, thank you. Pull up your normal seat, grab your coffee, your donuts, whatever it is you want to snack on while we're talking over the slate. And please, all of you come together and make sure you hit the like button for us. that helps us a tremendous amount. I always say I don't like to beg for likes, but I am actually super flabbergasted at how well the show does views wise when we do get those additional likes, and you guys are focused on helping us out with those. So I do appreciate that. That is one of the best ways you can continue to support the show, other than watching it, of course. But hitting that like button definitely helps. We're going to jump in. I know it's a little bit later. I've been coming on later and later. Takes time to process each of these slates, grinding through, the last couple of games of the night, and then jumping on there, working on the projection sheet, which we do offer now, have for a couple of months. That is a new aspect to our content this year. Getting show notes ready, checking out stats, updating this, updating that. You know how it is. We like to come here prepared and ready to go. And we are going to officially dive in right now for the 12 gamer. Now, last night, there were a few of you who asked about FanDuel. There were some it was a 6-game slate on FanDuel, and it had the West Virginia UCF game. So if there are any FanDuel questions, or you want me to touch on anything FanDuel, please feel free to reach out and do so. Even if you're watching on demand, you can reach out to me at dubdeuce85 on pretty much any social media platform, or you can talk on the on-demand comments of the show. I always circle back around and check throughout the day for any comments on the video and do answer those accordingly. It does look like the FanDuel slate is once again a 6-gamer, which does look to have all overlap for the DraftKings slate. So there isn't any games on that one that there isn't on DraftKings. I will be talking from a primarily DraftKings perspective. So as we're talking about it and applying it, if there's any big pricing discrepancies and you want to know about anything FanDuel related, feel free to reach out and we will get those taken care of for you. I'm using the layout that they made for me a while back. I always forget to use it. It's always kind of weird. It's like I have to peek over. So we'll see if I like this. If not, I'll just get rid of it in the middle of the show. Don't mind me. All right, getting into the first game on the slate. It is a wonderful slate, by the way. There are tons of great matchups here, some high total games, but this is going to be my favorite by far, and we're talking about Illinois, the Illini versus the Penn State Nittany Lions. Total of 157. That's pretty high for a Penn State game, no doubt. Illinois is a 7.5-point favorite, and if you have been playing along at home or paying attention to this season, you know that I'm a big DVP fan. I am really borderline obsessed with finding individualized DVP, team DVP, whatever I can do to exploit a matchup. I am very matchup based with my selection and building of lineups. That is something that I'm very cognizant of. And if we find a individual matchup that we can exploit before anyone else notices, and we've had quite a few, I'm just going to keep hammering it over and over. By now, everyone knows Penn State, DVP-wise, you can absolutely hammer them down low. They do have a bit of size there with a near 7-footer in Quidus Wahab, but it's not, and he's a great shot blocker, no doubt, but he's also a fouler, and he's just one guy. Outside of him, they don't have a lot of size on this team. Demetrius Lilly, who's about 6'10", he hasn't been particularly healthy this year, and when he is, he doesn't play a lot of minutes. They have just given up time and time again huge stat lines to opposing front court players. Now, they are much better on the perimeter. They have a massive on-ball defender in Ace Baldwin. DeMarco Dunn has chops this year to handle things defensively. Nick Kieran is a very solid kind of 3-and-D type guy, although he's not much of a three-point shooter these days, but he is definitely really solid on the defensive end. And they are getting, I should say they are not getting rid of, but out of the program at this moment, Kanye Clary, who is their best offensive option. So there's going to be some things opening up here. He wasn't particularly known for his defense, so that is still an area of Penn State's defense that they're going to be able to take care of business on with their high steal rates on various aspects, different players. So we want to target against them in the front court. That doesn't mean we can't look at Terry Shannon, who has been phenomenal. Illinois, 5th offensive efficiency per Ken Palm, 48th in defensive efficiency, but offense has been fantastic. Brad Underwood, who I don't particularly like it that much as a coach, to be honest with you, got to give it to him. He has this team rolling. They're 19-6, playing at the 65th fastest tempo in the country, coming off a really solid road win against Maryland. this is a team we want to target. Terry Shannon, who has been fantastic, leads the team in usage rate at 27% and shot rate at 26%, shooting about 35% from long range. And my man has a block rate of 3%. He doesn't care. He'll block shots on the perimeter there. Ace Baldwin, get out of here. Look out. He has scored 27, 31, and 28 real points in each of the last 3 games, 30% usage rate in those games as well. He is a fantastic overall option, and he can be considered a matchup-proof guy. Just because Penn State is so exploitable in the front court doesn't mean we can't necessarily target guards against them or wings. It certainly works. And Terry Shannon's price of 8.3 for the way he's been playing is relatively cheap, and especially in a road game here, well, he'll probably be tasked with playing 35-plus minutes. He has to be in consideration. So he is a great overall option. He projects extremely well for me on the early edition of the sheet. But I'm, of course, going to be looking to guys like Marcus Domask, who's sitting there at 7.4, a very paltry 7.4. Coleman Hawkins, who sits there at 7.9. I've really come around to Coleman Hawkins. It was so hard for me to want to pay these prices for him, but he's been phenomenal. And Ty Rodgers, who's 5'8", may even be considered a little sneaky there with some of his rebounding games lately. You have Quincy Guerrier at 5'4", who's technically in play for this matchup, although I don't know that he'll be able to exploit it. And then you have cheapies such as Justin Harmon, Luke Good, and those are they're basically their rotation. Draw, Gibbs, Lawhorn, Moretti, guys like that aren't really going to be playing. So the rotation is very easy to predict. Now, looking at the front court options for Illinois and who we want to actually target, and Dane Danger, I shouldn't forget about Dane Danger. He has a phenomenal rates overall, 25% usage, 25.5% shot rate, has a block rate over 4%, a combined rebounding rate over 31% as well. The problem with Dane Danger is that he just doesn't get the minutes. He's only 3.7. If he could get 10, 15, 16 minutes in this matchup, totally possible, and not get into just, ugly foul trouble, we could see him put up a 15 to 20 fantasy point score here. I really wish we could see him get more minutes. And in the past, when he has played minutes, he's done quite well. It only took him 10 minutes to get 14 against Maryland, 11 for 15 against Ohio State, and 28 fantasy points against Fairleigh Dickinson all the way back on December 29th, just after Christmas, and that was in 16 minutes. This is an elite spot. Dane Danger, crazier things have happened. You're looking for this potential 10x blow-up play. Today it was Chandler Jackson, although it became obvious to use him once Darren Green was out for FSU. But this is a spot for Dane Danger that he needs the minutes, and if he gets them, he could absolutely blow up that price. But we're going to be more conservative today, I think. I'm going to try and play a little bit more of a balanced build. The value isn't quite as feel-good as it was today. There's definitely some available, but it comes with some real downside and risks. So we can go to Marcus Domask at 7.4 or Coleman Hawkins at 7.9, and we may even be able to play both. This is one of the rare occasions where we can utilize two guys that are going to be cannibalizing each other to a degree for shots and rebounding opportunities, but because Hawkins will play a little bit onto the post, Domask floats out a little bit more. Both are excellent three-point shooters for their size and position. Domask rebounding numbers are fantastic. Coleman Hawkins rebounding numbers are strong. You can actually utilize both of these guys and probably going to sail over 30 fantasy points for each. So this is one of those spots where you can plug both of them in, and I might consider it a great deal. Right now, looking at it, Hawkins has shot 104 threes on the season, 39%. He does have a combined rebounding rate over 20%, plays a ton of minutes for this team in close games. I do think being it's on the road, even if they do build a nice little cushion, we will see him play 30-plus minutes as well. With that being said, at 33 minutes, he's just over 4x. I'm much higher on him than the sheet's going to show because I do believe the DVP in this spot is just way too elite. Domask, same thing, 7.4, giving him 36 to 37 minutes. Great overall play. So those are where I'm going to be looking here for Illinois. Now, you do have some secondary options, like I said, with Ty Rodgers, who comes with the guard forward eligibility. Now, you go back just a couple of weeks back in late January, early February, He had 10 rebounds against Ohio State and 14 boards against Nebraska. So he can get it done on the glass, and he can rack up fantasy points in a hurry. He has a 9.5% offensive rebounding rate, which is top 250 in the country. Quincy Guerrier has one of the best combined rebounding rates on the team at 31%. He has had some struggles throughout the conference season. It has been a really kind of a weird career for Guerrier, from his time at Syracuse to Oregon, now to Illinois. The main problem I see with Guerrier is that his minutes have been really dwindling the last few games, and Ty Rodgers playing so well, and that has made Guerrier a little bit more expendable. The price of 5.4 is really good, but we're not probably going to get Quincy Guerrier that was, mid-January playing 34, 35, 37 minutes. He was putting up a big number then as well. 31 fantasy points against Rutgers, 30 against Northwestern, 35 against Michigan. This was in a 3-game stretch in the middle of January, and then suddenly he just stopped getting minutes on a consistent basis. More of a GPP look here, but one that could definitely pay out. We're looking at Hawkins and Domask as main team plays, but there are several on this team that are secondary/GPP looks. Now, for Penn State, without Kanye Clary, he is out of the program, gone. I don't know what the deal is there. I don't want to even speculate. It doesn't matter. He's been coming off of the bench there. It's too bad. Clary has a real knack for scoring. Like to see him end up, maybe a mid-major program, somewhere where he can just, have a 40% usage rate and just go completely bonkers. Hasn't worked out for Penn State, although he did step up and really break out this season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him and where he ends up and what the level of transgression that happened for him to get booted off the team. Now, with Clary out, that leaves a ton of usage and a lot of minutes available. Penn State has lost 3 straight games, 2 of which have been on the road. One thing we know for sure, Ace Baldwin is going to play the entire game. So, he's going to be able to rack up steals, assists. He's been hitting some shots. Ace Baldwin is the one guy is going to be on the floor. Nick Kieran has been forced into a huge role. He's playing 30-plus minutes. Zach Hicks will have to play a lot of minutes. And DeMarco Dunn, who has been the main benefactor of Clary, either missing games or being limited. Now, my man Jameel Brown did play 21 minutes over the weekend, had a usage rate of 25%. 1 of 5 from long range, had 7 points, 2 rebounds, and a steal. Now, I've been angling heavily for Jameel Brown to get time. He is a sophomore sharpshooter that is definitely still in need of development, shooting right around 37% off the bench, 72 threes. In conference play, he has been absolutely chucking. And due to the fact that they are very down in offensive options for this team, especially with Clary out, it does give an opportunity for Jameel Brown to not only play more, but to take even more shots. He has a 31% shot rate in conference games, a 26% usage rate in 12 conference games as well. So I am, kind of been pushing the Jameel Brown train a little bit. 4K is not the cheapest or best price. Would have loved if he was min price 3K. I think I'd just be plugging him in and letting the chips fall how they may. There is definite risk here at 4K, but again, value maybe a little bit more spotty. But if we're going to be confident in him playing a 20-plus minute role now without Clary, I do like him quite a bit, especially in this spot against Illinois. He's going to be absolutely chucking, regardless of how long he actually plays. The Ace Baldwin play is decent at 8-1. His price has come down after he was nearly 9K. So I'm on board with using him, but I got to give it to this Illinois team. They are very good right now, the way that they're playing. There are some other cheapies here in Zach Hicks and Nick Kieran and DeMarco Dunn, but none of them really move the needle for me very much because Kieran's more focused on the defensive end. He doesn't typically put up these big stat lines, although he did hang 34 on Northwestern a couple of games ago. So he has shown some upside, but it's not typically there. All over the Illinois side, sprinkling a little Jameel Brown. Let's move on to the next one here. Florida versus Alabama. Now, this carries a total of 174. Bama, 8.5-point favorites. This is going to be an absolute track meet of a game. Alabama, we know, 11th in tempo. Number 1 offensive efficiency in the country per Ken Palm, 71st in defensive efficiency. They are just ridiculous. They absolutely pounded Texas A&M over the weekend at home, 100-75. The Aggies quickly falling apart. We saw them lose today to Arkansas, but they have been putting up some huge scores, have Bama. And then you look at Florida, 36th in tempo, 10th in offensive efficiency, 90th in defensive efficiency. But the big one here is that they are second in offensive rebounding efficiency. They didn't play particularly well over the weekend. They did beat Georgia 88-82 thanks to Walter Clayton and Zion Pullen, but we didn't see a very good performance out of Micah Hanlogden, who was mired in foul trouble, something we thought might happen, and Alex Condon, also very heavily in foul trouble. This opened the door for the other freshman, Thomas Howe, to play 26 minutes, and he delivered, hit 3 triples on his way to 17 points, 7 rebounds, a block, and a steal. It's important to realize he had that game because of the foul trouble for Hanlogden and Condon. Somebody had to take advantage of that Georgia front court, and Howe did it on the glass and also hitting jumpers all over the place. Might he earn some more minutes? That's probably going to be possible. He hasn't really played a lot in conference games, but he did on Texas A&M, their first meeting back on February 3rd. He played 13 minutes. Then he played 14 against Auburn, 11 against LSU, and then he spiked with the 26 against Georgia. I'm not going to be running out there to roster him in, every lineup possible. He is relatively cheap at 4.2, but we have to make the recognition that his playing time is going to come from foul trouble to the 2 guys in front of him. Condon has a fantastic fantasy point per minute number. His rebounding and block rates are elite. Micah Hanlogden, same thing. He is very solid on the glass and blocks, but both are foul risks on the road here against Bama. Thomas could step into another 20-plus minutes here, depending on how that shakes out. But I want to make it clear there so people don't feel like, they've got to roster this guy at 4.2. He's a lock. Why aren't you coring him? And then, he plays 12 minutes. The thing is with him, he's been putting up a pretty high fantasy point per minute number as well. He has pretty solid rates in his own right there, especially in conference play. Combined rebounding rate of 28%, block rate of 4%, and a steal rate over 2.5%, shooting right around 33%. So he may be in line for more minutes either way. This could actually just lead to a watered-down version of Alex Condon and Micah Hanlogden, where the 3 of them are just cannibalizing each other and splitting those front court minutes up. And if that happens, it's an absolute disaster, because typically not going to take minutes away from Tyrese Samuel, although we have to make the recognition he was also mired in heavy foul trouble over the weekend. 4 fouls for Hanlogden, Samuel, and Condon. Looking for answers and somebody to come up and step into the game and hold down the fort. Thomas Howe did do that, and he put up a really solid outing. But 3 players in front of him had to get in foul trouble for it to happen. So I just want to harp on that. Riley Kugel played 18 minutes, was another pretty lackluster game for him. I don't think we can use him. We're back to not using him again. He's 5'5". I didn't really use him even after he blew up against Texas A&M. Then they had the Auburn blowout. I dipped the toe back in the water against LSU. Only 15 fantasy points. It's just really hard to peg Riley. He is such an up and down performer, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that the Gators are just super deep. This is a team that has a seemingly endless amount of wings and shooters. Denzel Aberdeen, who barely plays, the sophomore, he could be a starter on several other programs. Granted, they would probably be low to mid-major and maybe some teams like DePaul, but he's a really talented kid that just can't get on the floor because there's so many guys at his position in front of him. So that's the bench talk for Florida. We have Zion Pullen playing every minute possible. Walter Clayton, who is heating up at the right time here for Florida. And then you have Will Richard, who, had been splitting that time with Riley. Now he played 31 minutes, but he wasn't particularly great there either. Tyrese Samuel, Micah Hanlogden. Looking at the various Florida options, I'm definitely going to want to get involved with a total of 174, and that's something that we can expect everybody to do. With the influx of people playing from the NBA All-Star break, that is a fairly common thing we'll see, just going to the high total and thinking, how can I stack this game up? The projections obviously love guys like Walter Clayton, Tyrese Samuel, Zion Pullen, all 3 projecting well over 4.2x. Micah at 5'9", just at 24 minutes. As long as he doesn't get into foul trouble, he is a well over 20 fantasy point guy. And then Alex Condon, who to me is going to be the sneak at 5'7". I don't think he gets into foul trouble here. I think he figures it out. Maybe Micah does, but either way, Condon should be in line for about 20 to 22 minutes. And that's all he really needs to pay off a price like this in a great matchup like this against Alabama, who has a front court full of foulers themselves. It will be a race to see who gets who in foul trouble here. As far as Alabama goes, Mark Sears is just the absolute, dominant presence in the SEC. He is finally starting to get priced at a level where you have to think about it before rostering him. For most of the season, it's just been an auto lock-in Mark Sears. These prices aren't right. 8.4 is a joke. 8.3 is a joke. Now we got him at 8.9, nearing 9K. I think this will be the last time he's below 9K. He should be able to put together a huge stat line against his Florida team in a game environment that just is perfect for him in every way. Sears did have a couple of slow start games here recently, but he has done so much damage in the second half that it has not mattered. So you can tilt all you want, and that is the way, but just know with Sears, he's going to give you a lot in the second half typically. With Alabama's big win here over A&M, in which they just were so dominant, I just totally shocked. This Texas A&M team is falling apart, and I'm suddenly having to rethink what I thought of them. But outside of Sears, we saw a pretty steady game for Aaron Estrada, 11, 3, and 7. Latrell Wrightsell had 16. 17 for Rylan Griffin, and then we saw Sam Walters come off the bench, hit a couple of threes, do what he does. They got a bunch of their secondary guys in. Outside of Sears, you have good prices for Rylan Griffin at 5'8", who seems to be setting himself apart from some of the other guards again. Latrell Wrightsell, who's a GPP look at 6'6", and then Aaron Estrada at 7'2", who has massive pop there as well, but starting to find it difficult as his usage gets cannibalized by the emergence of Wrightsell and the re-emergence of Rylan Griffin. If you can't pay up for Sears, I think you certainly want to get one of the guards here, whether that's Wrightsell, Griffin, or Estrada. I lean Rylan Griffin, not just because he put up that really strong game against LSU, followed it up with another high-scoring performance there against Texas A&M, but he has scored 12-plus real points in 4 of his last 5 games. Fantasy-wise, he doesn't do a lot in the peripheral category, so he needs to score those points, but seeing him priced below 6K and in a role where in a close game he's going to play 30 minutes, he is definitely one of my favorite options on this Bama team. Not looking at Nick Pringle, Sam Walters is nice if it's a blowout. He has, high efficiency, shoots a ton of threes, but I don't want to get too cute in this game. I want to definitely mini stack it in some of my GBP builds, but I'm not going to feel obligated to take some of these secondary plays that just don't look very good. The slate's large, and there are a ton of other spots I want to target. St. John's versus Georgetown next up. St. John's 9.5-point favorites. We'll see. Total of 151. Rick Pitino, who has earned the right to criticize whoever he wants, right? This is a legendary coach who has just, won at every level, but he is very, very upset. St. John's with a roster, and I will say I am a fan of coaches. I'm from an era where participation trophies, get those out of here. Like, if you do something that is wrong or you make a mistake, you don't need to necessarily get beaten up for it, but you need to hear about it. You need to get coached up. You need to make sure you don't make those mistakes again. And seeing Rick Pitino just go off the rails in his pressers and Twitter, he's a hilarious Twitter follow. Just like your drunk uncle at the party that says the most offlandish things. He's that dude, but on Twitter. But his team is 14-12. He's complaining about their toughness. He's complaining about their basketball IQ. And I have to question, okay, this is a legendary coach. Obviously, we can't really question him, but at the same time, you built this roster, Rick. You chased off AJ Storr. You chased off Posh Alexander. You chased off David Jones. Dylan Adewusu, Andre Curbelo, probably a good thing to chase him off. But you had a roster, Colby King, Raphael Pinson, all of these guys, Omar Stanley, all of these guys are absolutely nuking in their new spots. Omar Stanley has gone to Boise State and become like a borderline first team all Mountain West player. Dylan Adeuso at Seton Hall, he's been tough offensively. He doesn't have a lot of skill set there, but he's a really good on ball defender. He's adequate. Posh Alexander, we already know the deal. He's one of the best to ever do it. I don't care. David Jones putting up massive video game numbers at Memphis, although it doesn't necessarily translate to wins, but he's putting up huge numbers. And AJ Storr, who has turned himself into a voluminous scorer, has the second highest shot rate, third highest usage rate, eighth highest fouls drawn rate in the Big Ten. He's just putting up huge numbers for Wisconsin. Just think of that roster that you could have had. Instead, chasing them off because you alienated everyone else except Joel Soriano, and then also had to gush all over Drisa Traore, which still to this day, I don't know why he was, for lack of a better term, slobbing him like that. But, you got the roster that you wanted, and it's not working out. It's time for this team to figure it out, though. It's not too late. They're 14-12. They have some games, winnable games. They have some opportunities. Georgetown they got to get that done. They cannot afford to drop this game on the road to a bad Hoyas team. They have Creighton, Butler coming up next. Then an easy win against DePaul and another easy win, which will be at home against Georgetown. So not a lot of opportunities, and then they'll have to make some noise in the Big East, but they got to pull it together here and now. That loss to Seton Hall was the most pathetic second half of basketball I have watched in a long time, and I'm a Washington Huskies fan. I see a pathetic coaching and playing for the Huskies year in, year out with the damn Mike Hopkins. It's got to go. But still, that second half by St. John's to blow a huge lead to Seton Hall like that, it's just absolutely pathetic. All right, with that out of the way, obviously we want to target them here against Georgetown. It is a phenomenal matchup. We saw the starting lineup get messed with a few times here. We saw Joel Soriano in the doghouse. It seems he's currently out of the doghouse. Back into the starting five he went. In 29 minutes, he had 13 points, 12 rebounds, 3 blocks, and a steal against Seton Hall. So we certainly are going to be looking to use Soriano here against Georgetown, especially if he reigns in the starting lineup. He's simply too cheap at 7-3. Price only went up $300. Now, we did have the value in Zuby Ejiofor, who, unless he's starting, can't really be used. Just played the 11 minutes off the bench. He's $5K, so we don't have to worry about him. RJ Lewis, who continues to be relatively chalky at 6'2", can't seem to figure out how to stop fouling or turning the ball over. I don't mind him if you want to go that route, but I'm going to do it like this with RJ Lewis. If he projects to be chalky, I'm just going to fade him. If he's, nobody's using him, then I'll probably throw some shares in there, maybe the Q or whatever. But this is not a player that I want to be level with the field on, and he's not a player I want any part of if he's going to be mega chalky. So that's the deal with RJ Lewis. Still like Chris Ledlam, who's relatively cheap at 6'4", but he's starting to take a backseat again to some of the guys in front of him, Dennis Jenkins and Joel Soriano. Like, if St. John's going to pull themselves out of this, it's got to be on the back of Soriano and Dennis Jenkins. Jenkins is a little bit higher at 8'4", put up a big number of 841 there, bumped his price from 7.6 to 8.4, so it's a little bit more difficult to utilize him. I do think he racks up a ton of steals here against this Hoyas backcourt. He'll always be, racking up peripherals with assists and rebounds as well. Has an extremely high assist rate, and he can score the ball as well as anyone here in the Big East. So in a luxury play for him, Soriano a core play for us. And then we have the cheapie Jordan Dingle. I don't want to press my luck. We had the legacy game against DePaul for Jordan Dingle that we called. Got him at 5% ownership. He put together 32. They will be playing DePaul one more time this season, so we'll go back to Dingle then. But I'm not really going to probably be using too much of him, although the matchup against the Hoyas, again, is extremely premium. Off the bench, we saw Naheem Aline play 20 minutes and Sean Conway play 13. Glenn Taylor, really not a factor. Brady Dunlap, who had his time in the, to shine for DFS slates for maybe 2 or 3 days, is really not a factor either. I just want to roster Joel Soriano, and I think I'm really off to St. John's stacks, which usually when the Hoyas are on the slate, I'm looking to stack them up, but I just don't know if that's going to be the answer here, especially with the way that St. John's looked in that second half, the way Rick Pitino eviscerated his team. They're either going to come out mentally tough and play really hard, or they're just going to be, hanging their head and Patino lost the team. So we'll see how that turns out. It's going to go one of those two ways. There's no gray area here. It's cut and dry. They're either going to come out super motivated and kick ass, or they're just going to hang their head and lose to a bad Georgetown team. Projections wise, RJ Lewis projects extremely well. I don't know that we'll see him get close to 30 minutes though, because I feel like he's just going to be adult and foul in this one. I kind of just foresee that happening. And then you have Jenkins and Soriano both projecting extremely well, as you can imagine. On the Georgetown side, it is a matchup that, St. John's, they're giving up fantasy points to multiple positions, bleeding them, in fact. So the 6'9" price of Jaden Epps, that to me is a real nice buy low spot. People have seemingly forgot about him. The Alpha Guard and Ed Cooley offense typically is a premium play that you want all the exposure to. Teams have figured out Georgetown pretty easily. They don't have a lot of other offensive options. So Epps has been forced into a really inefficient volume scorer type role. You're seeing 6 of 19, 3 for 12, 2 for 8, 6 for 18. Some really poorish shooting nights for Jaden Epps. His peripherals have also taken a hit, which has caused his salary to torpedo from the 8K range down now to 6'9". But I do like this spot for him at home against St. John's. He's going to be a core play for me and somebody that I'm using in a lot of my lineups. Supreme Cook, if he doesn't get into foul trouble and can stay on the floor, he's a pretty solid option. 7-7 is a bit spendy here, but the way he's playing, really confident, high rebounding rate, taking a ton of shots. 3 of his last 4, he has taken 10-plus shots, and he has just been an absolute terror against teams like UConn, Villanova, and Creighton, who have all been pretty stout defensively throughout the season. As far as secondary plays go, Wayne Bristol is there at 4-3. He seems to have locked down a 20-plus minute rotation role. So, desperation value, Bristol can be considered for that reason alone. Not that exciting. Jay Heath is back down to 5-1, but, he had his playing over his head game. This is another guy who's been ravaged with injuries over the years. He's really not that interesting to me at that price. I would like Rowan Brumbaugh if he was back to starting and playing 30-plus minutes, but obviously no guarantee there. Ish Masood has just been awful. And then you have the younger player, Drew Fielder, who probably should be getting more minutes. He's near min price. I actually kind of like him here. Sounds like they're going to try and play him some additional time. If we see him kind of clock into the 18 to 21 minute range, he could really easily pay off that price there of 3-3. He played 17 minutes against Marquette for the closest reference to that prediction, and he had nearly 20 fantasy points. Pretty raw, but overall talented. Would need some Supreme Cook foul trouble for that to happen, though. All right, moving right along here, we've got Oklahoma State versus Cincinnati. The Bearcats, 10-point favorites, total of 139.5. Oklahoma State has been absolutely dreadful this year. Not a game I'm looking forward to whatsoever. I don't know what the deal. Mike Boynton's got to be on his way out, right? Because in conference, they played a lousy as possible non-con schedule that you can, with an overtime loss to Notre Dame. They did play Creighton, but they got just completely hammered there. And glorious wins over South Carolina State, Wofford, Tulsa, Chicago State. But in conference, they have just been pelted time and time again. Now, they did beat BYU 93-83 over the weekend, which was a surprising win, but I think they're going to get handled by the Bearcats here. So I'm not necessarily looking to too many of them, but there are some value pieces that we can at least consider or have been playing additional minutes here. And with Bryce Thompson, who's been out the last few games and is going to be out for the rest of the season as we wind things down. Jameron Keller has seen a big spike in minutes, and I had noticed this trend going back to the K-State game, but now people are going to take note because he was 8 of 8, 4 of 4 from downtown, played 38 minutes against BYU, got extremely hot. Now, we were using Keller in some alt builds here because he was near min price. Because of that explosion, he's 4-4. That will probably cause some ownership to happen there. It's not a sneak anymore. The starting 5 they ran with, Keller up top, Kion Williams, who's back out of the doghouse, Javon Small, John Michael Wright, and Brandon Garrison. It's a really small lineup. It's so shocking they were able to beat BYU with that small-ass lineup. Off the bench, Eric Daly, Jarius Hicklin, and Mike Marsh. So they're running that short rotation as well. So it does stand to reason Keller should continue to play some bigger minutes here. He is a real nice look there. Hicklin is at least somewhat interesting. He's priced at 3-4. His minutes have been trending downward even without Thompson, so that's a little bit of a concern there. He doesn't offer much of a threat offensively, and that's been part of the problem. But at 3-4, he's at least in the conversation for value in the large field GPPs, just as a throwaway type play that'll get you a extra pay up or two. John Michael Wright is okay at 5-5. He's more of a kind of middling play, but he's somewhat safe in that range for 3.5 to 4x. Kyan Williams to me is overpriced at 5.9, even though he's put up 27 plus in 3 of his last 4. It is not lost on me how poorly he played in the beginning of conference play. So poorly, in fact. How poorly? So poorly, in fact, that he was benched, lost his starting spot, played sometimes 3 minutes, sometimes 10, sometimes not at all. So we're only removed from that by like 3 weeks. It was only 3 weeks ago this was happening. So out of necessity and lack of having another guard to play over him, Kyan Williams has been playing 32 plus minutes in each of his last 4. Awful against Houston. He gets a pass because everybody is awful against them. He's been outstanding in every game since. So at 5.9, I think we'll probably see some ownership there. But the Cincinnati defense is relatively strong in its own right. I think Williams is a fade, but we'll see how that shakes out. Then Brandon Garrison at 6.2. He's got to play big here against this Bearcats front court. Staying out of foul trouble will be crucial for him. We'll see if that works out. He's a little bit of a riskier play because of that. But the 6.2 price point, again, they're lacking depth. He's going to have to play a lot regardless. It's a decent enough price for him, and he has shown upside in the past. Let's go over to where are you at? There we are. All right. Keller projects the best, then John Michael Wright, but I can turn down his minutes a little bit. I think we just want to take Keller and maybe move on there. On the Cincinnati side, it's been a little troublesome with them. They've had some pretty nice games, but for the most part, I feel like we rarely are looking back and being like, damn, why didn't we roster this guy? There's been a few for Dan Skillings, who I love, but there's rarely a time where we're sitting here being like, why didn't we roster Day Thomas? Oh, no, we didn't have Seamus Lukosius. What are we going to do? Not John Newman. Like, there's nobody really on this roster right now that makes me feel like I have to play them. We are seeing Victor Larkin struggle mightily with the various injuries. He missed the game, then he started 4 straight, failed to eclipse 20 minutes in any of those. I believe he played less than 30 seconds in the last game off the bench there. He is a really sound player and very, very good, but he's clearly not healthy right now and can't be used. He's only 4'8", which is crazy. Even if he starts, be careful, because I don't think we see him play a full 20 minutes, let alone 30 or something like that he would need. This has allowed Aziz Bandiago to take over as the primary front court player. He is a massive foul risk for the most part, but he has scored 21 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 5. Will be able to take advantage of some of that lack of size that Oklahoma State does not have, especially if they get Garrison into foul trouble. There's not going to be anybody to check Bandiago on the glass. He's a relatively sneaky look at 5'9", because it's a price point that I think people are going to gloss over. It's not comfortable by any means, but with Locke and Ailing, nobody on Oklahoma State capable of controlling the glass, we could see Bandiago pull down like 14 rebounds in this matchup. In fact, we'll look for some rebounding props for him before the end of the show, because I do think he can have a nice one here. Otherwise, we're going to see a ton of minutes for Seamus, John Newman, Day Thomas. That's kind of the conglomerate core nucleus that they run. The only player that there's 2 really good players that I do feel like I want to use in some capacity. Dan Skillings, who is priced up to 7.1 now. Skillings is a special player. He is in that Tari Eason mold of athleticism, scoring ability, can absolutely fill it up in multiple ways. doesn't quite have the overall usage rates, although they're raising quite quickly. He does have a 26.4% shot rate. He has taken almost 100 threes on the season, shooting low 32%, but the combined rebounding rate is elite at 27%, has a block rate of 3%. I just see so much Terry Eason in his game. A little bit lazy to say, or late, because of Cincinnati, but Skillings is the real deal, and he's only a sophomore, and I don't believe we'll see him run to the NBA or anything anytime soon. And it is worth noting he's been a sporadic starter. Even when he comes off the bench, we've still seen him play 29 to 30 minutes consistently, but he did start against UCF and played 31. If you're planning to use Skillings, keep that in mind. Tomorrow, when the starting lineup screenshots, I start dropping them in Discord, you don't have to be panicked. If you're on Skillings and he's not starting, he still will play starter minutes regardless if he's starting or not. So just keep that in mind. There also is merit to starting to look at Jizzle James. It's a fun name to say. I get it. Let's get that out of the way now. Giggity. But Jizzle James, great rates, 24.6% usage rate, 26% shot rate. He's only a freshman. He had a plethora of programs after him, ton of talent, has an assist rate of 25%. We were starting to see those minutes trend up, 20 against Houston, 25 against Iowa State, and those are two really tough matchups, but he performed quite well in both. 10 points, 3 rebounds against Houston, which might as well be a million against them. 16 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists against Iowa State, another tough defense. Both of those were losses, and then the win over UCF, he played just 14 minutes, but he had 7 points and an assist. 28% usage rate in that game, 29% usage rate in Iowa State, and 28% usage rate against Houston. Jizzle James coming off the bench. It might not be long before they try to get him a spot starter too. We'll see. But he is at least in the conversation. He's priced at 4.6, little higher than I'd want to pay. If he's low 4K, I think I could sell that one a little bit more and feel comfortable there. As is, I'm a little bit leery just because the minutes are not a guarantee. But if we put him on about 22 to 23 minutes, he does project quite well to make value. So we'll see how that shakes out. Very, very crucial for an accurate minutes projection there for Jizzle James, because if he plays 14, it's just going to be a brick. Okay. So moving right along here, we're on to Clemson versus Georgia Tech. Totals 145.5. Clemson are 7-point favorites. Clemson had such a weird performance against NC State. They end up losing 78-77. DJ Horn's been going nuts. But Joey Girard and Chase Hunter just basically, it seemed like, at least watching that game, they took every single shot. It left almost nothing offensively for Ian Schiffelin and PJ Hall, who had to kind of force his way to get points at the foul line, ended up with 18 and 7, but clearly not the game for him when you're paying a top tier price. I think we see a little bit more balance out of Clemson today. Reason being, they're playing a much softer opponent in Georgia Tech. They should be able to score at will against this Tech team, rebound extremely well. Last time these two teams played, it was a double OT loss for Clemson, 93-90, but some massive stat lines across the board. Nathan George, who's been stupid in his freshman season, has been so good. 20 points, 6 assists there. Bayandongo, 11 points, 10 rebounds, had a block and a steal. 31 out of PJ Hall in that one. He also had 17 rebounds. Ian Schiffelin had 20 and 15. 18 for Chase Hunter. Joey Girard struggled in that one, to be noted. And then we also saw RJ Godfrey get it done off the bench, 8 points and a couple of rebounds there. This was before Jack Clark was playing the heavy minutes that we're seeing now, which Dylan Hunter played 36 minutes in that game. We'll now see Jack Clark play 25 plus. So we want Clemson exposure because, again, Georgia Tech is a fantasy-friendly unit. Looking at Clemson, PJ Hall is a reasonable price at 8,800. I would be shocked if he didn't put up 40 at minimum. We will have to probably endure a couple of cheaper players that maybe we're not super crazy about. And we'll also have to sacrifice some mid-range guys who I'm really high on to get PJ Hall in. That's if you want to go PJ Hall. And I am one of the biggest PJ Hall proponents in this industry, have been for 3+ years now. Love him. Ian Schiffelin at 7-4. He is always, to me, going to be the sneak, and I know he has been kind of ordinary, especially the last couple of games, and his price isn't cheap enough to really feel good about playing in like a main lineup. We're over that with Ian Schiffelin, but for GPPs, there are few better spots of leverage here on this particular slate. He's just high enough priced at 7-4 for people to fade him on that alone. And if somebody's going to go with Clemson, they're going to look to get to PJ Hall by any means necessary. He's been below 26 fantasy points in 3 straight games, which will also keep his rostership down. But it's real easy to see why I'm so excited about him. He's such an elite rebounder. He's going to have a lot of putback opportunities against Georgia Tech. That's how he got so many points last time against them. He does add other categories such as assists and steals as well. We just need him to get back into that real, 10 to 12 point real points category. If he can put up double digits there, I think you do see him put up 35 plus. If PJ Hall gets into foul trouble, playing a little bit of narrative there, or they always, Adam Young made this comment in the Discord the other day, and it was kind of like it's true, but at the same time, it was like a little cringeworthy, right? Because they say it in football all the time, like your lineup has to tell a story. So, if you roster Schiffelin, you're basically saying to yourself, PJ Hall is going to get into foul trouble. They can go off together, and they have in this same matchup, but I think you definitely want to treat it as a either or situation, not together. Jack Clark is getting up there in price now that he's 6K. He was a unflappable value play for the last 3 or 4 games. There was no decision point at all. It was just click him in. I still used him at 5-7 against NC State. He played 33 minutes. He's getting a ton of playing time. But at 6K, it gets harder. However, just because we're not mindlessly clicking him into our lineups anymore, it doesn't mean we should full fade him, because it is a very strong DBP spot for him and his skill set. Strong rebounder, gets it done in the stocks categories, can score a little bit. There's no reason to think he can't 5X this 6K price, especially if he plays 30 plus minutes. And there's reason to think that he has played 27 plus in 4 straight. And since being a starter, he has been dialed in and, knock on wood, not getting into any foul trouble. And he's currently as healthy as he's been in a very long time. So while Jack Clark's price is up there and his rostership is going to be a fraction of what it was the last couple of slates, he's still very much in play here. Do not fully fade him if you're running multiple lineups. Joey Girard at 7-5, it's a little high for me. He's going to take a ton of shots. And then Chase Hunter at 6-3, who's a good price there. Has to get there from a volume standpoint, he and Girard. Hunter typically is more of a facilitator. He does have a really strong assist rate on this team. Locked in. I have liked to use Hunter in the past, but I'm usually looking at him when he's below 6K, not over 6K. Again, a matchup that he can do well in, especially with 34 plus minutes. It's just a secondary option for me. I want one of the Clemson forwards. That's how I'm playing it. On the Georgia Tech side, Nathan George, man, as good as he's been, it's tough to face or to use him in this matchup against Clemson. And he does have, as a youngster, a inconsistent nature about him. Plays a ton of minutes, but the game against Syracuse, he was completely awful. Got into some early foul trouble. Took 0, shots in the second half, I believe. He was 0 for 2 for the game. It's actually the second time in 3 games he's been under 15 fantasy points as well. But he was very strong against NC State, 18-4-5. Very strong against Wake Forest, 12-5-7. Like, when he's cooking, he is very, very good. And he put up that huge number against Clemson last time. Going to be minutes based here. The 2 games where he was awful, both of those he played under 24 minutes. Games that he played over 30, we've seen him go completely bonkers. Don't love the spot for him against Clemson, but he is cheap at 5-6. A last man in, perhaps. Yes, this is a volatile mid 5K range play. But as we saw today, all those 5-1, 5-3, 5-4 guys that were like, is it this guy or this guy? A ton of them brick today. And there is with the way pricing is, sub 6K really has to be considered value. So those guys in the 5-4s and 5-6, those are value plays. And rarely are they going to be slam dunk locks. There's going to be some variance there, of course, but there's also a lot of risk with some of these plays. And Georgia's definitely not without risk. Tafari Gapare, he had the big game. He finally had the game that I had really been kind of talking about his capabilities of. Now, I haven't been rostering Gapare very often, but I have been watching him, and I think he's uber talented. Against Syracuse, 9 rebounds, 10 points, just filling it up. 27 fantasy points there in just 22 minutes. Fouls are going to have to be held in check. We're looking for here with Gapare is Bayandongo, to sit early with 2 fouls. Gapare only played 9 minutes against Clemson. He's in a much bigger role now than when he was last time they faced, as a cheaper starter, but again, priced up at 5.2 now. Not super appealing there. I don't want to chase that by any means, but that did show you what he's actually capable with. He's not a total stiff, and now people can see that and believe, hey, he is actually good at basketball. I didn't realize. Kwesi Reeves, cheap at 4.9, has really fallen out of the upper echelon of the pecking order. Shots have gone down, but the last 2 games, the minutes have started to go back up. So maybe we're going to start seeing some more Kwesi Reeves here. We know he's uber talented as well. This is just a really weird, odd put together Georgia Tech roster. David Stoudemire has done as good a job as he could. There's real talent on this roster, but it's super raw. They need to really work hard in the offseason developing some of these guys and keeping them, and also hitting the portal for somebody to play a combo guard role that can actually facilitate with consistency. No offense to Miles Kelly. I like Miles Kelly, but they need an upgraded version over Miles Kelly to really kind of push this team to the next level. Other options, not really exciting. Sean Cloud, who started the season so hot, minutes just haven't been there with any kind of consistency for him. Kyle Sturdivant had a massive game for us a month or 2 ago at near min price. He did put up 31 against Syracuse. He's got that in his bag. He is an easy GPP look here at 5.1. Could play 12 minutes, could play as many as 35. It's really a hot hand situation there for Dame Stoudemire, and he does play Sturdivant sparingly at times. He keeps a very short leash on him, but he just happened to be really hot, 4 of 8 from downtown, and ended up playing 32 minutes. And then that leaves us with Bayandongo, who at 6.8 is absolutely in play. It's a higher price for him. We got him cheaper for a few games here. He has been an absolute revelation. Nobody talking about him in the offseason. Steps into the starting lineup very quickly and has just been dominant time and time again. This will be a tough spot against Clemson, but again, he had a double-double, 11 points and 10 rebounds against them last time before he eventually fouled out. And he did that in 41 minutes because of the double overtime, which did lead to 28 fantasy points. So without those overtimes, he would have been more into the 18-19 range. So it does make me a little bit leery about paying 6.8 for him. But if there's one Georgia Tech player that you want to force me into, it would be Bayandongo. Miles Kelly at 7.2, 51 against Louisville, 35 against Syracuse. I'm not going to be tempted to play him. He's got such a wide range of outcomes, literally a 3 or a 60. Now, I like Miles Kelly. He's a big-time volume scorer. He's been rebounding ridiculously well lately, too. I don't know that can continue. I would not foresee him pulling down 10 rebounds, let alone, not even 6-7 rebounds against this Clemson front court. They're going to be able to do some damage there. He had 14 and 6 against Clemson before. He's just too high priced at 7.2 for me to really want to use him in this spot here. I think there's just other opportunities that we can utilize without having to pay up for Miles Kelly. All right, moving on to the next one here. What's up, Reese? Please go over Western Carolina and UNCG. Yeah, we can talk about some betting stuff there at the end. And then Boss is back for night 2. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for the support. Hope you did well tonight. Wants to talk about some FanDuel stuff. We will circle back around at the end on that as well. All right, Duke versus Miami. Duke 5-point favorites, total of 150. What's the deal with Kyle Filipkowski, man? He's only 8.2. It's so cheap. We're going to have to be sucked into using him again. Now, he was awesome against Wake Forest as mega chalk. Against FSU, not as good there. Had 4 fouls, played just 28 minutes. Jared McCain had like the craziest game ever. Looked like Reggie Miller out there hitting all those threes. Philip Kowski wasn't really needed offensively at that point. Do like him against Miami. Fouls are going to be a risk, obviously, always on the road. So that is something to be aware about. But they still continue to price him just way too cheap. It's going to be hard not to have a lot of him. And it's a situation where he wasn't as highly owned against FSU. He still had, quite a bit of rostership. But if people are kind of, getting a little cute here and not just plugging in Kyle because it's on the road and dealing with Norchad O'Meara, I'm happy to be overweight on him compared to the rest of the field. Just the 8-2 with his rates. We need 34, 35 minutes, not 28, God forbid, foul trouble, all that stuff. But if we get an actual game in which he plays his normal allotment of minutes, there's just no way he doesn't shatter that 8-2 price point. Like, we're talking about a 5x plus return, and I'm almost, really confident. I'm not going to name him the number one play of the slate, but he's really, really high for me. Top 3, easy. Jared McCain's 8-2. Crazy to say he's priced the same as Philip Kowski. Now, he's good. I mean, he shot ridiculous, just absolutely ridiculous. So there's really no way for me to feel good about chasing that performance. He knocked down 8 of 11 threes. That's 73% for you mathematicians at home. Took 20 shots. Now, it is the 3rd time in the last 5 games that he's taken 15-plus shots. He has taken on a much larger role in the offense. And a lot of it we've seen with Philip Kowski, his offense has taken a dip. But 4 of those last 5, he's been above 33 fantasy points. So it's not as if he hasn't been doing it. But when I see 8 of 11 3-point shooting, that makes me want to kind of run the other way, even though this is a good fantasy-friendly matchup against a short bench Miami that is perfectly okay with pushing the pace and turning this into a track meet. Jeremy Roach is still cheap at 6'4". He was solid. He's getting you those mid-20s fantasy points. The price has come up here at 6'4", so not as much of a main team look. However, if Tyrese Proctor were to miss another game as he's in concussion protocol, which cost him the FSU game, it does mean Roach should be locked into 35, 36, maybe even 37 minutes. We'll keep an eye on that. There's also Caleb Foster as probably the overall top 2 best value on the slate. Not the best fantasy point per minute numbers, but he did play 35 minutes against FSU there. He's priced at 4.7. Again, Tyrese Proctor being out gets Foster the start. Proctor being back probably drops Foster more to like a 22, 23-minute number, which is still fine at his 4.7 price point. I think we're just kind of desperate for value, so he is a guy that we can obviously look at. And you never know when the random Ryan Young game will happen. He's only 3.6. If you're running some GPPs, you can toss him in. He put up 25 against Georgia Tech, 21 against Virginia Tech. He just has these random high games where he's grabbing every rebound, blocking every shot, hitting every shot. And he's only had to do it in 14 to 16 minutes. So Ryan Young, also a large field GPP type of value if you want to utilize him. And then lastly, Mark Mitchell. Now, I was using him as a leverage spot. Whenever I wasn't paying up for Philip Kowski, I was looking to Mitchell. He had a pretty tough outing against FSU over the weekend. He's been pretty steady otherwise. Proctor being out bumps him closer to 37, 38 minutes just from a overall usage standpoint as well. There's a nice bump for him. Wasn't as involved, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that, again, Jared McCain was shooting 8 of 11 from long range, and he basically got caught just watching the show. You look at his other performances in the last 5, he has consistently been scoring 25-plus fantasy points. So I don't mind Mark Mitchell as well. Miami side, they never can be healthy. It's just this team. I don't know that they're necessarily throwing in the towel on the season. They're 15-11 though, and it's quickly slipping away. They have lost 4 straight and 5 of their last 6. The culmination of which, losing 85-77 to a Boston College team that they really should be beating. This line, -5 for Duke, might be a very advantageous spot. We might be talking about a double-digit win here for Duke. Nigel Pack has already been ruled out as he's been dealing with injuries all season long. Matthew Cleveland has been the latest dealing with injuries. He has not been practicing as he's got an illness, not an injury this time. With the COVID that ran around, it definitely lowered, I don't know about y'all, but it lowered immune systems. I had like the worst flu ever a year ago. You guys remember I was like missing shows because I was like on my deathbed, and it's still like the severe flu going on. So when you see it happen, it usually knocks a couple of players out, a couple of coaches out, and they just can't play through it like they have in the past. So depending on how sick he actually is, there's a good chance Cleveland could miss or be limited at the very least. So we're talking about, again, a short-handed Miami team. They've been living this way, and they just got Keshawn George back after he's been dealing with his injuries. Fouled out in 15 minutes as mega chalk against BC. Now he's priced at only 5.7, no Nigel Pack, going up against Duke in a matchup that is pretty neutral on paper. We can imagine that Keshawn George is going to be extremely popular and probably well above 50% in all contests, regardless of it being a 12-game slate. So keep that in mind there for Keshawn George. The starting five without Pack and without Cleveland would be Bensley Joseph, Norchad Omier, Wooga Poplar, Keshawn George, and probably at this point Paul Dishbet. If Cleveland plays, then obviously he starts there. We did see 16 minutes out of Ja'Kai Robertson, who's a sophomore. I've been wanting to see more minutes around. And then Paul Dishbet, the freshman, played 20 minutes, had a 21% usage rate. He's actually looked fairly steady in his short bench appearances. He hasn't played much this season. However, of the last 3 weeks, he has had 4 games over 15 minutes, and he's played quite well in those appearances. Then he had the 2 DNPs against North Carolina and Clemson, but again, out of necessity, they had to go to him against Boston College, and he did play 20 minutes and was fairly decent in those minutes. He's only 3-3. So if he were to start no Cleveland, obviously becomes a pretty no-brainer, and we're just using value here from Miami and Keshawn George. I don't want to use him just because everyone else is, because that really puts us in a dangerous spot, but he's also a very good play at that, so I'm okay eating that chalk. You do have Michael Nwoko as well at min price. He's really probably, even without Packer Cleveland, not going to see a ton of minutes. He's more of the direct replacement for Norchad Omier when he missed time. AJ Casey hasn't been playing at all, and he was stepping in for Wooga Poplar. And that really just leaves us with Ja'Kai Robinson, whose min price, if he stepped into a starting gig, I would probably roll him in 90% of lineups, not because I think he's some supreme talent, although I do think he's good. He's just super raw. But at 3K in a slate where we need value, like if he gives me 6, I'm just going to take that 2X and hope the payups that I get out of it can cover the rest. So we'll see how that shakes out. Every Miami slate, we got to wait to see the starters. The nice thing about it is the slate does start half an hour earlier again, so make sure you don't get caught with your pants down. But the Miami game is in the second wave, which start just a half an hour later. So we won't have to wait long to see what happens there with that Miami starting five and the actual status of Matthew Cleveland and his illness. All right, next game on the slate here, we have Providence versus Xavier. Total of 149.5. Xavier 5-point favorites, and I don't know about all that. Providence, obviously, I mean, Jesus, they have a very short bench as well. They're just kind of starting to struggle here, but the Xavier team is not great. KenPom does have it 74-70 in favor of Xavier. Now, they are going to be at home in the, the Cinta Center. So that is why they're getting those 5 points. But I think Providence on the back of Devin Carter and Josh Oduro can definitely win this one outright or at the very least cover. So that is a betting spot for me. The same spiel I always give with Xavier. It's really, Quincy Oliveri, who's priced for me way too high at 9-2. I just don't find myself getting there. He puts up some big games, no doubt, but it's just such a huge opportunity cost. He did struggle against Providence way back in early January when they played. Had himself a ton of turnovers and foul trouble. Ended up with less than 20 fantasy points. Not necessarily a prediction of what will happen tomorrow, but I'm kind of always leery about him and that price. Davion McKnight's priced down at 7.3 after breaking out against Seton Hall. He had a 30 fantasy point game against Providence last time. And then the third member of the trio that you normally want to look at, Des Cloud, he's had a rough outing there against Seton Hall, but it's cost his price to go to 7-1, which is very reasonable for him. The cheapest of their three main options. He put up 33 against Providence in their last meeting. Really like him. He is definitely at the top half of my list, somebody that I may not end up landing there for the main lineup, but I'm certainly going to have exposure. And when he is on with his contributions on the offensive end and his strong peripheral stats, he can put up a huge, huge number here. So 30 plus fantasy points should be in the cards for Cloud, but this Providence matchup, it's no joke. It's not particularly easy. Other options, you have a 5'4" Abu Usman, who always projects well, but, fouls be damned if he can work his way past that. He is at home. He has only 3 fouls in the last 3 games instead of the 11 in the prior 2 like he did against DePaul at St. John's, so that's a good sign, but only 19 minutes against Creighton, only 8 against Seton Hall. We'll see how it shakes out here, but he's just a very risky option as well. I just want to stick with those primary 3 from Xavier, but I'm only going to pay for either McKnight or Des Cloud. On Providence side, Devin Carter, well worth paying up for. Kicking myself, I had him in, a fair amount of spots against DePaul. Ended up talking myself out of, like 90% exposure because, the blowout. And this is why I'd say, worrying about a blowout in college basketball is such a long-term losing proposition because, number one, especially when it's a road game, things happen. Home court advantage in college basketball is so ridiculous. It's way more of a factor than it is in other sports. Also, because of the net and metrics and the tournaments and all that, coaches, I should say, leave their guys in longer because they have to get these margin of victories. We've been seeing it a lot recently, games that are fairly out of hand, and when they usually maybe get pulled in the 5-6 minute mark in the second half, we're seeing them play through to the last 30 seconds, last 2 minutes. So I'm not really trying to worry about blowouts too much anymore. And Devin Carter was a perfect case in point. They only won by 11 against DePaul. He had to play 33 minutes, and he put up a 60 banger. So 9.5K, it won't be easy because, like I said, there's a distinct lack of feel-good value, but he is definitely a guy I'm going to get involved in props in this matchup. Just a really good opportunity for him to continue to put up huge numbers. Now, Providence, obviously, they've dealt with a ton of injuries themselves. They seemingly are back on track with who they have left. They have had a rotation in the starting 5, Corey Floyd, Garwi Duell. We've seen Rich Barron start the last couple. So right now, Devin Carter, Jaden Pierre, who's back in the starting 5, Josh Oduro, Ticket Gaines, and again, Rich Barron. Corey Floyd and Garwi Duell have been very low fantasy point per minute players. Not a lot of excitement there. They're both really cheap. Floyd at 4.7, Duell at 3.6, but Barron, who gives us guard forward eligibility and is only 3.8K, is the one that I want to look at. He has played 22 plus minutes in 3 straight games and at least seems locked into the rotation for right now. This is a favorable matchup. He had 9.5 points against DePaul, and it's a good case in point. He was 3.5. He gave us very close to 3X. He didn't kill our lineups. He got him some points, and we're able to get some pay-ups because of it. So that's kind of how I'm going to treat Rich Barron. The 2 games prior to that, he put up right around 14.5 fantasy points. So I like Rich Barron. As long as he continues to start, I'm going to use him in this spot. Georgia versus Vanderbilt is next up here. It is a 1-point spread in favor of Georgia, total of 144. And Georgia, man, so disappointed with the last Georgia slate. Found myself, getting kind of hooked into that Florida game, expecting it to be high scoring. Silas Demery projects super well, and then he ends up playing 26 lackluster minutes. Noah Thomason took the game over, hit 5 threes. Didn't leave a lot of room for others. Russell Tashwad, 15 and 4. Jabri Abdur-Rahim was mostly a non-factor. Jalen Deloche started, surprisingly, but only played 19 minutes, did almost nothing. And then we saw Justin Hill play extremely well off the bench. RJ Melendez played 19 minutes, Blue Cane 18. That was pretty much it for their bench. So this Georgia team is cheap for the most part, but really tough to peg and almost impossible to feel good about rostering. That is really kind of the problem that I have with them. Demery is somebody I'm going to be very cautious with. He's only at 5'6". The minutes should be there. It's a good matchup, but we've seen Vanderbilt, especially when they've been at home, kind of play this little bit of a spoiler role, and they've held teams in check when they really shouldn't. So I'm very nervous about Georgia in this game. I think that the actual spread there makes a lot of sense. It's a true pickup. Now, Ken Palm has it as a 74-68 victory for Georgia. I feel like there's zero chance Georgia wins by more than 2 or 3 points, and Vanderbilt may just end up winning outright. I will let others chase Noah Thomason. He was absolutely on fire. He's priced at 5'9". It's a good price for him, but typically he has struggled in SEC games coming over from Niagara. I think that that's a really easy fade spot there. Let others chase him. If you're going to use somebody, Justin Hill at 5'4", he makes more sense. And whether he starts or not, it appears he's primed to play mid-20s minutes. So he's out there on the floor. Jabri Abdur-Rahim at 5'2". I know he struggled last time, maybe more of a GPP look, but at 5'2", he's in the conversation for value. And then you've got guys like RJ Melendez and Blue Cane playing 20-plus minutes. Melendez is probably too expensive unless starting at 5'3". Cane at 4'5" is an interesting value GPP look against this Vanderbilt team. On the Vanderbilt side, it's usually our man Ezra Mannion, who's only 6'3", and he has been really good. Did get knocked around recently and kind of was in danger of missing time and or a game, but he did play through it. Was awful against Tennessee. Those things happen. They got their doors completely blown off over the weekend, 53-88. Look for Mannion to be in a position to bounce back here at 6'3". Easily one of the top options on Vanderbilt, somebody that I have no problem utilizing here in this matchup against Georgia. Right now, I have him projected extremely high, over 31 fantasy points in just over 35 minutes. Tyron Lawrence at 6'2", he's very cheap. Ben Allen Lubin at 6'1". They've got all three of their top options grouped up. No problem using anyone. The true DVP spot here favors Van Allen Lubin because front court against Georgia has been a thing. Van Allen Lubin is a bit of a foul risk, but we have seen him really settle into a alpha front court role spot for this Vanderbilt team. And I'm definitely comfortable utilizing him there at that 6'1". Mannion is the priority, but I can definitely get to Van Allen Lubin. 8.5% offensive rebounding rate, 21% shot rate, 20% usage rate, and a 4.5% block rate. Tyron Lawrence and Ezra Mannion both over 25% for shot rate. They're playing a ton of minutes. Those are the guys. The other options on Vanderbilt have varied. We've seen Jason Rivera-Torres start to get back in the rotation after missing some games. He actually has phenomenal rates across the board. If he were ever to eclipse 30 minutes, he has just an outstanding chance to semi-break the slate. 30% shot rate, 26% usage rate, combined rebounding rate over 24%, and a steal rate of 3.5%. 35 would be immaculate. The problem is, since getting 2 starts in late January, he's been banged up. He missed a game against South Carolina. He's failed to play 20 minutes in any of the last 6. So even though his rates are fantastic, the minutes just aren't there for us to utilize him right now. Other guys, someone who cost me the seat just recently, Evan Taylor, played only 17 minutes off the bench. We saw Tassos Kamateros and Isaiah West get the start, and then Carter Lang play 15 minutes. Malik Presley and Jaqueline Roberts both played 15 minutes off the bench as well. A lot of that was a product of the blowout and why so many different players got options there. Now, when they beat Texas A&M 74-73 at the Memorial Gym, that one was a little bit more condensed. They still started West and Kamateros, but Evan Taylor played 22 minutes, and then we saw Paul Lewis pop up there for 15. Jason Rivero Torres played around 12, and Jaqueline Roberts just under 13. Isaiah West is cheap. If he's going to play 20-plus minutes as a starter, certainly can look there. But usually that fourth or fifth cheap starter for Vanderbilt has been a really lame duck position. Now, the freshman Carter Lang, inexplicably racking up DMPs, but it's only every other game. So he'll play 15 to 16 minutes, then he gets a DMP, then he'll play 15 minutes and get a DMP. So it's tough if he's not starting, which he's had several starts. To start the beginning of this season, he had 3 starts in his first 5 games. He's been sporadic since, but he hasn't started games since late December. So probably not going to get that luxury. So we just aren't going to know. No guarantee whatsoever. He is very nearly min price at 3.1K. He is a very good, it's a DVP spot. It's a very good matchup for him. I just don't know if he's going to rack up the DMP CD or if we're going to get him for those 15 minutes. If you could guarantee me that Carter Lang was going to play just 15 minutes against Georgia in this matchup, I'd probably roster him in my main lineup. And I know that sounds a little bit maybe borderline irrational, but he's actually a pretty decent player for them. Stackhouse's rotations have been nuts. We know that he starts bench players over starters, and then vice versa. Minutes are all over the place. He's got a plethora of secondary looks and young, undeveloped talent. I know he's just looking for something to work, but getting these guys in and out of the lineup all the time can't be good for their development, can't be good for their mental, and we're seeing guys struggle. But Carter Lang is somebody watching the last couple of Vanderbilt games that has looked impressive and does deserve more minutes. Whether he'll get those extra minutes remains to be seen, but I will have some exposure there. Maybe I'll do some searching on Vanderbilt boards in the morning to see what we can find. All right, next game on the slate, Nebraska versus Indiana, a true pick'em, 147 total. Indiana, Malik Renew, Jesus, man, just so much heartbreak with Renew recently. He was mega chalky on that slate. He got into just silly foul trouble. That tends to be the case with him. Now he's only 6'1". He projects extremely well. Kel Ware is 8'3". So it's almost a no-brainer if you want an Indiana play, which I don't necessarily love targeting against Nebraska, but they are at home. And Indiana should at least do well here on paper, but you're getting such a huge discount on Renew. Now, even though he was in massive foul trouble and did foul out against Northwestern, he did still put up a decent score when you consider how many minutes he actually played. Now, he has fouled out in 3 of his last 4, and he has had 4+ fouls in 4 straight, but his upside is massive. He put up 50 against Ohio State in 38 minutes. That's what I'm looking for. We got to get him over that 30-minute mark. But his fouls lately have been alarming, and he is getting charges as well, which is a double dose of just pain because you're racking up a turnover and a foul. Only 6'1". I don't know what I'm going to do with him yet. He obviously projects completely bonkers. Like we give him his, basically his season average of 32 minutes, 32 fantasy points. What is that, 5.2x? Like, yeah, he's going to project really well. But my sheet here doesn't tell me, because I don't have a crystal ball like Miss Cleo to say like he's going to get into foul trouble. Now, since I got to bring this up, especially since we have so many new people watching tonight, fouls have not been something that tilts me at all. I've been playing for a long time, close to a decade now. Fouls also weren't hurting us much this year. Like, I had to be and I know better than to make comments like this and tempt the gods. Very superstitious, by the way. The first 2 months of the season, fouls didn't really hurt us. Like, it's like, wow, okay, either refs are not calling fouls like before, they are, or we've just been super, high variance into the positive because we're not getting any foul trouble here for our guys. Since I stupidly said that the last 2 weeks, we have been having guys like Tamin Lipsey who never in foul trouble 2 of his last 3 games. Solo Washington tried to hurt us tonight. He got 2 fouls in the first half, but he did end up with a nice score. We have just been seeing a ton of foul trouble, and Malik Renew was just victimizing us in their last game when he had 2 quick ones, a third very quick in the second half, a fourth, a fifth, out of here. It's been a very tough journey here the last 2 weeks, but we're going to get through it. And I'm sacrificing that, that lamb, goat, whatever it is here. we're going to be back on track and avoiding fouls. So the price, it's so cheap on Renew, we may not be able to get away from it, but there's no guarantee that it works out, and that's just going to be the really tough decision there. Has phenomenal rates: 28% shot rate, 29% usage rate, 20% assist rate, shooting about 35% from long range, draws 5 fouls per 40. He's just been so good for them this year, but can he stay on the court? That remains to be seen. Now, Kel Ware dropped a 52 against Northwestern because Malik was in such foul trouble. That's caused Kel's price to go back up over 8K. He's actually a nice play, though. He's so much more expensive than Malik, it makes almost no sense to roster him. But for you contrarian types out there like me, paying up for him might not be such a bad idea, especially if Renew continues to get handsy and not stay on the floor. There isn't anyone else really on this team, and Mackenzie Mbako, he played 35 minutes because of Malik's foul trouble, so technically he can be used, but 6'4" is just a really middling price for him. Trey Galloway at 6'7", I know he's been actually really good and playing some of the best basketball of his career in conference play, but I just find it very difficult to justify paying $7K for Galloway. I think Nebraska does have the defense to make life difficult for him, and I'm almost never using Anthony Leal. Kind of sucked us in after Ohio State. Like, are the minutes going to be there? Let's check. No, they weren't. Gabe Cupps, low fantasy point per minute player, even though will play 30-plus minutes at times. And then Anthony Walker, who's just completely stuck in oblivion, will probably never play 10 minutes in a game ever again. On the Nebraska side, we have really cheap prices, and we know for Indiana, they have all this athleticism in the front court, but their perimeter defense is porous, and their front court defense is starting to go that way as well, especially with all the foul issues that they've had. So overall, the Indiana defense has just been a very advantageous group to target against pretty much every slate they've been on for the last month and a half. Starts with Juwan Gary, who has phenomenal rates across the board, priced at 6'5". But he is another foul guy, so we'll have to be careful here because he can come in here and hack Kel Ware a bunch of times. We got to avoid that. The matchup against Penn State was a premium for him. He did have 13.6 rebounds, 2 steals. What happened was Nebraska just kind of beat up on them. Minutes for the starters weren't there. They did sit some in a blowout, so he would have put up a much bigger number had he been given more minutes. But with Juwan Gary starting and at a sub 7K price point, he just has to be strongly in consideration in all formats. You have Bryce Williams at 6'5", kind of a jack of all trades. While at Charlotte, he was a big-time volume scorer. He hasn't been that here for Nebraska. They have various other guys who can do that. He does contribute in all other categories. It's a little bit of a riskier play there, especially lately, but at 6'5", there's definitive upside. Rink Mast is the most expensive at 7'5". Real slate breaking probability here in this matchup for Rink Mast, as long as he doesn't get any uncharacteristic foul trouble. Mast has been a really big boost for this team with Juwan Gary in and out of the lineup with various ailments. 25.2% shot rate, shooting 37% from long range, has an assist rate of 21% and a combined rebounding rate of 28%. Very similar to the way Derek Walker played. Has been a quarterback type. Definitely a big fan of Rink Mast in this spot. Ksai Tamanaga, who has never met a shot he doesn't like, shooting 38% from long range. He's a bit spendy for me at 6K. Put up that 40 against Illinois, but typically, he's going to shoot his way close to 20 fantasy points most nights, so there still is room for 4X here for him, but he's going to offer us nothing besides shots. And he can heat up in a hurry, but I just can't see myself using him at 6K. As far as anyone else, CJ Welcher, his minutes have started to drop again. I didn't jump in on CJ Welcher like some did. We've seen this from him for a couple of seasons now. He'll heat up a little bit. The price is reasonable. Oh, let's jump on CJ Welcher. Oh, he just delivered a 5.5 fantasy point game. So tread lightly when you're talking about using a play like that. And overall, I don't have a lot of interest in what I would call the secondary options for Nebraska. It's just Juwan Gary, Rink Mast, Bryce Williams for me. Williams probably not going to make the player pool for me at the end of the day, except for maybe some alt builds in GPP. But Gary or Master absolutely in the consideration for main team construction. All right, Kentucky versus LSU, total of 164. Kentucky 7-point favorites. What is Auburn doing? Auburn making a liar out of me. They've just been so, for lack of a better term, nails at home. But then to get just, blanked like that by Kentucky 70-59, that was absolutely embarrassing the way that they played. Janai Broom had his typical nice game, but overall, Auburn struggled. Looking at this Kentucky team, they are relatively deep. It's a great on paper matchup against LSU. The Kentucky way of playing basketball, they're 37th in tempo, 8th in offensive efficiency. They are just a fantastic three-point shooting team, second best in the country. And then you look at LSU, top 50 and top 60 in tempo. This is going to turn into a situation where, yes, lots of points are going to be scored. Lots of stats are going to be put on the board. There's going to be no doubt about this one being one of the more stackable games on the slate, similar to what we just saw from Texas A&M and Arkansas today, which we mentioned, rostering 3, 4, hell, even 5 pieces. That's a possibility here when it comes to Kentucky. Justin Edwards has been back, so they've been running him as a starter. DJ Wagner back, running him as a starter, and then Adutiero back, running him as a starter. That's along with Antonio Reeves and Egano Onyenso, at least until we see, Trey Mitchell return, who does have an official questionable tag here with the shoulder issue. Now, he hasn't practiced for the past 2 days from what I saw on Twitter. Seems pretty unlikely that he will be out once again. And if that's the case, Onyenso at 6'2" as a starter is definitely a strong play. Because of the fact that Kentucky has multiple options in the front court, it's made him a little bit of a riskier option, but it does seem Calipari has been confidently going to him. You saw against Ole Miss, 24 minutes, he had 10 blocks. Obviously a ridiculous block number, but he has been an elite rim protector all season long, and that is a category we can rely on him to deliver 2 or 3 from. Against Auburn, 36 minutes, mostly avoided foul trouble, 11 rebounds, 7 points, 26 fantasy points. So this is a fantastic spot. Just has to keep his hands to himself, not pick up foul trouble. He has played so well, it's actually relegated Aaron Bradshaw to the bench, deep onto the bench. He played just 3 minutes against Auburn in that win, just 13 minutes against Ole Miss in that win, and just 10 minutes against Gonzaga in a close loss. He's only 4K. At this point, unless he jumped in the starting lineup, I think that's a pretty lean play. Can't really trust it. Basically, you're saying, I'm going to roster Bradshaw, and I'm just Onyenso. I'm gonna bank on Onyenso getting into foul trouble and sitting, most of the first half, and then picking up another early foul in the second, thus forcing Bradshaw onto the floor. But then you also have to account for Zvonimir Ivicevic, who has been playing very sporadically, but when he does get minutes, man, he can fill it up in a hurry. His very first game for Kentucky, he put up 33 in 16 minutes against Georgia. Obviously, that was a huge blip, but he did put up 24 and 12 against Vanderbilt, and this is causing his rates to be just outrageous, and he breaks the projection sheet if I give him more than 5 minutes because of it. So it's hard to actually project him correctly, but again, if Onyenso gets into foul trouble, there's no guarantee Bradshaw just suddenly eats up 20-plus minutes. Ivicevic is going to be out there for some as well, which is going to cause them to cannibalize each other to a degree. Only want to stick with the starting front court. I only want to stick with the starting front court for Kentucky. That's the way I'm going to play it. Off the bench, you can still consider Rob Dillingham, who's expensive at 7K for a bench piece, I know, and Reed Shepherd at 8K. They just do a better job bringing them off the bench. It's an elite matchup and spot for their play style, so either of them can be used. A mini Kentucky stack is very possible. DJ Wagner's only 5'1". He makes it relatively easy to get exposure. I know he hasn't been great. Justin Edwards is only 5K. He hasn't been great. The 2 freshmen that everybody thought were going to just dominate haven't, and Odu Tiero at 5.5, who's actually been a relatively steady presence since he got into the starting lineup. So a myriad of options here for Kentucky to consider. On the LSU side, Jalen Cook has a questionable tag there. He is dealing with what is being called a lower leg injury. I would consider him doubtful. His official tag is questionable. I do not see him playing. Based off of what I read on message boards, it seems like he's going to be out for a handful of games still. That could obviously change. We've seen guys doubtful 5 minutes to the game time, then they end up playing, and it ruins things, and it's pretty frustrating with injuries this year. But I do foresee him not playing as of now. The starting five without Cook against South Carolina in a game they gutted out, Jordan Wright, Trey Hannibal, Will Baker, Derek Fountain, and Tyrell Ward. They brought Mike Williams off the bench and Jalen Reed, but both still played 22-plus minutes. Fountain and Ward played 16 and 18. So Williams and Reed still got more minutes, even though they were moved to the bench. Hunter Dean played 15. Mwani Wilkinson played 13. Other than that, it was a relatively short rotation with only five guys playing 20-plus minutes. Jordan Wright was the play of the game, 14, 7, and 3 with 2 blocks, 2 steals. He was really cheap on that last slate, 6'6", and against Florida at 6'4". So he's been a pretty big auto play without Jalen Cook. And now he's priced at $7K, but I'm still highly interested in him here without Cook because he absorbs a ton of that usage and becomes just a very obvious alpha look here and probably about 1K underpriced without Cook. As far as the Jalen Reed, Tyrell Ward thing goes, they're both in the mid 5K range. You basically just want to typically go with the starter. Now, Reed had started like 8 games in a row prior to that. He actually looked really good off the bench, so they may continue to do that. It's probably a little bit more irrelevant which one you use based off starter status. I do think Jalen Reed plays the most minutes of the two for what it's worth. Ward is a little bit more expensive at 5'6", but he has put up 19-plus fantasy points in 3 straight, while Reed has done it just once in that same span. Trey Hannibal at 5'9". If he's not fouling uncharacteristically, he's generally been a pretty strong option since being inserted into the starting lineup. Would envision him playing 30-plus minutes without Cook, so he can be used as well. And then you have Will Baker, who was just mega chalk against Bama, put up a huge number. And the reason, people would just be like, why don't we play Will Baker all the time? And it's like, well, you either haven't watched Will Baker over the years or you only looked at the game logs. He has been a very strong presence for them in some tough games. Alabama and Tennessee, he put up big numbers. But once you're talking about 7K for Will Baker, it's time to really pump the brakes because he is such a inconsistent option and a streaky shooter. Still shot 6 of 10 against Florida, but had almost no peripherals, dropped to 18. And then against South Carolina, which is a very tough environment and a tough defense, even though they won that game, they made a decision to take Will Baker out of it. They held him to 1 of 6 shooting. He completely bombed out. Matchup against Kentucky is good. Defensively, Kentucky has gotten a lot better. They have some serious athletes. They are elite rim protectors, which Baker is going to try to live on the 3-point line, but we'll see how they D him up. They also have to account for Jordan Wright, but I think Will Baker is probably a what I would consider to be a mediocre play here, just because I'm not certain he plays more than 23, 24 minutes. All right, moving on to the next game here, we have Ole Miss and Mississippi State. This is a total of 142.5. Mississippi State 7.5-point favorites. The question becomes Tolu Smith or not. I know in the Discord, Adam Young's leading the Never Tolu revolution. He's only priced at 7.6. It is a nice spot against Ole Miss. The problem with Tolu is, outside of being a fouler, is his minutes have really failed to hit a certain threshold that I'm looking for with Tolu and his price point. We have seen him play 22, 25, 31, 25, and 25 over the last 5, whereas his first 4 games back, he played 28 or plus or more minutes, and he was churning out 33, 41, 42 fantasy points in those games. So, he's trying to probably do a little bit too much. He's picking up those fouls. His rebounding rates are elite. He's still putting up some fairly strong numbers, but those minutes definitely worry me there. Ole Miss has a ton of guys who are comfortable driving the basketball, especially Flanny. I worry about Tolu Smith's ability here. It is a home game, but I do feel like he's going to continue to get himself into foul trouble. Conservatively putting his minutes somewhere around 27, 28, and he's just under 4x at that. We're talking about fouls dropping him to 25, which he's played 25 or less minutes in 4 of last 5, then we're talking about him not making value. So I'm a little bit worried about Tolu Smith. I do like Cam Matthews. He's priced higher at 7-8. He's just been that built-in contrarian play on Tolu Smith chalk, slates. Matthews has just been freaking amazing, and people don't even realize it. 36 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. He was tearing it up before when Tolu was out, right? Tolu comes back, expect Matthews to fall off a cliff, and he doesn't. He just continues to churn out big numbers. He's not a big-time scorer, although he put up 17 real against Arkansas. He just has the most impressive peripheral stats, and there's very few others in the SEC that have comparable. He's just been so phenomenal across the board there. And it's crazy because he's only 6'7", so he's not like some 7-foot giant, but he does have a 28% combined rebounding rate. He has a block rate over 3.5%, a steal rate of 4.5%, which is top 30 in the country. Really good play. 7-8 is going to be a tough price to get to. I think we're talking about sub 5% ownership, but he has been absolutely fantastic. But really nobody's going to want to pay for him over Tolu Smith, but it may still end up being the play here, especially if you're still pulling the Tolu Smith foul story. Sean Jones at 5K. He's entrenched as a starter now. I'm good with it. That's one of those plays where he's a value. I'm not expecting him to put up a big number, and I'm just kind of content with him giving me a 3x score. He does have Deshaun Davis breathing down his neck, and because they're splitting time, it does kind of whittle down the upside for both, but I do lean towards Jones still as a play, especially if DJ Jeffries remains out, and there is no timetable that I've seen, so I think that will continue. Trey Fort has been in and out of the lineup as well. They've been shorthanded. So Jones, even though he's splitting time with Davis, his role is relatively secure. Josh Hubbard's probably a little too expensive at 6'9", but he's fine in a game stack. Ole Miss likes to put up points. Hubbard will oblige them and try to shoot a ton, so I don't hate it. And then Shaquille Moore at 5'6", not that interested in him either. Ole Miss, we hit hard on them over the weekend, playing against a bad Missouri team. They had to dig deep to win, but Flanagan gave us 40. Morrell gave us near 40. We got some big stat lines from their guys. Jalen Murray put up 30, so the Ole Miss stack worked. Prices are back up now because of it, and the Mississippi State defense isn't necessarily a hugely fantasy-friendly unit, which means I think Ole Miss guys should be considered more luxury plays than anything. Flanagan at nearly 8K. He's over 4X, but just barely. Matthew Morrell at 7'6", reliant on his scoring ability. I think he's fine, but opportunity cost there. Murray at 6'8" is probably an interesting play because of pricing, but his rates aren't nearly as good as the others. More of a secondary play. Mo Cisse qualifies as a value option at 5'1", but that's almost zero chance he can stay out of foul trouble there. If he gets Tolu Smith into foul trouble quickly, then Cisse could have a nice game, but I do think Cisse ends up playing, less than 20 minutes because of fouls. You do have my guy Brandon Murray at 4'6", who I've been waiting on, and we've been using him, on and off. He's had some nice games for us. We got him when he put up that 22 against the Aggies there a couple of weeks ago. Still playing a sound, 20-plus minutes. He only played 9 against Missouri. I thought there may have been like an injury or something there. I did not go into the Ole Miss message boards, which I'm going to plan to do. But I definitely was concerned about him playing only 9 minutes there. But his play style, his skill set, it is something they can use against Mississippi State. So barring some sort of injury that they're not really talking about, I do think Murray gets back into playing 20 to 25 minutes, which makes him in play as a sub 5K option. He doesn't start, so it makes it hard to really justify sometimes, but I do think he's back in the mix playing those 20 plus minutes. All right, last game on the slate, DePaul versus Marquette. Probably could have done without the DePaul game, but we got it. 25.5 point spread. Marquette is favored by 1 million. Total of 150. Now, again, I'm not going to let a possible blowout make it so where I don't land on some of these Marquette guys. I don't want to miss out like we did on some of the Providence guys there. And we didn't really miss out. We had exposure, but, again, would have preferred to have, 90% Devin Carter against DePaul. Tyler Kolek's priced at 9K, but in full allotment of minutes, normally he would get 37. I don't know that we can give him 37. He'll probably lose some, but still 33. He's projecting over 37 fantasy points. Cam Jones projects extremely well. Now the Marquette, beat down at the hands of UConn, which UConn just got beat down by Creighton. Whatever. I don't know. Shows you how good these players are. Cam Jones in 29 minutes against UConn, 15 real points, took 12 shots. So he shot himself back up to 6K. We like that mid 5K range, but he's very playable against DePaul. Because of his reliance on scoring, there's not a lot of effort on his part on other categories. So if the shot's not falling like it didn't against St. John's, 3 for 10, he's not going to make value, and especially at a more elevated price here at 6K. So much cheaper than Kolek, but know that because of his lack of non-scoring categories, there is a chance for a big brick there to happen. Oso Ighodaro at 8K. He should dominate DePaul in every facet. Against UConn, he had 14, 4, and 3, 2 blocks, 2 steals. He still put up 31.5. There is just no way to doubt Oso Ighodaro. Like I said, coming into the season, I thought he was going to get pushed around by opposing Big East centers. That hasn't happened, and he has held his own in every matchup. Last time they played DePaul, it was 86-73. He ended up playing 36 minutes. He had 19, 12, and 6 on his way to 48. He is only 8K. He is the Marquette play that I've identified as the top option. 1K cheaper than Kolek. Doesn't have maybe the same level of upside there, but consistency is there, and he's only 8K. I think he waltzes right into 4X, putting up the 32 for us, but I think there's potential for 40 plus before it gets too far out of hand when Marquette eventually probably wins by 25 to 30 real points. Other options outside of them, you've got David Joplin, who's 5'7". That's a cheap price for him. Stevie Mitchell at 5'3", also relatively cheap. And then you have some bench pieces that could be interesting. Chase Ross, if he plays 20-plus minutes, and Ben Gold, if he plays 20-plus minutes. That's more so if you're playing for the blowout. I do think Ross is a viable guy to use in your main lineup at just 4.2K. Whenever there's been foul trouble since he's been back, he stepped into those roles, or if there's been injuries and he's gotten spot starts, he's performed quite well. He's not a slate breaker by any means, but we can definitely get 4X out of him. We can probably eke out close to 20 from him in this particular matchup as well. I think people might glaze over him a bit or simply overlook him. And if we get him at a sub 15% rostership at that price of 4.2 playing 20-plus minutes, I'm going to have a heavy amount of exposure there to Chase Ross. So that is a maybe quote-unquote sneakier value to look at. For DePaul, it continues to be ugly. The lame duck season, or career, I should say, of Tony Stubblefield. They're 3-22. There's talks of former Ohio State coach Chris Holtmann getting DePaul job, although he did apparently say he's holding out. He said it privately, but of course somebody had to leak it, that he's holding out hopes for a better job than DePaul. And I got to say, Holtmann, who do you think you are? You're not some amazing coach. So why don't you get it done at DePaul, and then you can start demanding other jobs. I think DePaul should snuff him, and he can go coach at Eastern Michigan or something. Anyways, DePaul, this team is horrid. They don't even offer the one thing I say at every DePaul slate, Jeremiah Odin under points prop has been so profitable. So profitable indeed that the DK book doesn't even offer it anymore. He's not starting. He lost his starting gig to Churchill Ebast, even though the freshman has really struggled to stay on the court because of fouls. Odin's barely playing 20 minutes. So if you can find any book that offers a Jeremiah Odin point prop, slam the under, quote unquote, generational wealth opportunity there. It is a really big cheat code. Chico Carter did come back. He played 26 minutes. He didn't start, but it's good to see Carter back in the rotation there after missing almost a month of the season. 27% usage rate in that game, 8 points, 2 assists. He wasn't particularly great against Providence, but it was good to see him after missing so much time, play those kind of minutes. Now, he's only priced at 5.2. If he starts, gotta probably play him. The matchup against Marquette's no good. It's officially he's been out dealing with a rib injury. But I think there's a solid chance for him to start. And even if he doesn't, knowing that he played close to 30 minutes off the bench in what was a relatively close game for a while there against Providence, that just gives me a lot of confidence to use Chico Carter because we know how good he's been for this team. There hasn't been a lot of good for this team, but Carter's definitely been one of those bright spots. 25% assist rate, shooting 36% from long range, 22% shot rate, and a 20% usage rate. So I am going to be on Chico Carter, and probably even if he doesn't start, I may still roll him out there. With his rates, I mean, the matchup sucks, but we can get 20 out of him here at 5.2, playing 27 minutes. So he's definitely in our player pool here, but I'm not going to sit here and be like, he's the best or anything like that, but definitely on board there. This does negatively impact Elijah Fisher, Jaden Henley, Jalen Terry to a degree. They were already sort of cannibalizing themselves because there's kind of a carbon copy of perimeter options on this team. It's really hurt Jalen Terry. Jaden Henley and Elijah Fisher both still scored 15 real points with Carter back, but Jalen Terry had 9 and 6. Just okay with the price that he's been. So I'll leave it at that. We're not stacking DePaul. Although I guess if you did and it worked out, you'd look like a super genius. Elijah Fisher still a solid play, even with Carter. The former Texas Tech transfer has performed extremely well for DePaul without Carter, and he still put up 20-plus fantasy points in their loss to Providence with Carter in the lineup. All right, so that is the DK slate all wrapped up. Core is going to be Coleman Hawkins or Marcus Damask, whichever you prefer. And yes, you can use both if you want in the same lineup. If you don't, certainly run some alts to get exposure to the various Illinois options. They are going to be one of the mini stacks that I see having the upside and the chops to win you outright the $18 GBP. And it's the first game on the slate. How about that? All right. So confidently on that one. The other core play, I really wanted to go Jaden Epps, but I don't know if I'm quite there with him. Just know that 6.9 price point is just way too cheap for him. It's super advantageous. Put it that. Core play number 2, as long as he continues to start, and I think he will. Joel Soriano here in a matchup against Georgetown that he should dominate. It's just it's a combination of a price play at 7.3, but also it's Joel Soriano, an elite player that has hopefully worked his way out of the doghouse permanently. And then the third member of the core, we're going to go with the cheap-priced Ezra Mannion at 6.3. He's just been very steady for us. We've cored him a couple of times over the last month of the season. The matchup against Georgia is premium. Like, who would be shocked if he put up 40-plus here in this spot? Nobody. So that is the core we're going to work with. Severely underpriced plays, Kyle Filipkowski, Malik Renew, Tyron Lawrence, and I would say Jaden Epps. Those are all very, very severely underpriced plays that we can utilize. Oso Ighodaro is also right up there in the core play territory. I don't know that he'll be super chalky, although it's DePaul. So I'd like to label Oso Ighodaro the posh play of the day, but I'll need a little bit more information there as I do my rounds tomorrow and see what other providers are saying about Oso. All right, let's get over to hey, what's up, Saw? Didn't even notice you were there, brother. Glad to finally catch a show. People need to channel their inner Sox 22 this slate. So many great plays around 8K and very volatile value. Punt away to get the studs. Yeah, or balance Betty. You could go with some balance Betty action here. Oh, so it's good to see you, man. That's good to see you. I ruined my season in Dynasty for you. It's not friendship. I don't know what is. All right, what stud should we target? Now you were asking about FanDuel, Bosquat, last night. I know you were earlier as well. So let me pull up the FanDuel slate real quick. All right. So Devin Carter is for FanDuel. This is super expensive at 8.7. That is a real tough price to swallow sometimes. Now FanDuel, remember I told you last night, and it worked today. You can get away with like almost outright punting and taking a near zero. It doesn't always work, but FanDuel has been that way for a very long time. You can have a severely dead spot in your lineup and still cash. It's almost like you can treat it as a showdown slate, like on DraftKings. So as far as studs go, Devin Carter and Mark Sears, I mean, getting one of them in your lineup if you can is a phenomenal action to do. Both very high usage, going to score a ton. I like quite a bit there at 7.5 Des Cloud against Providence for Xavier. I think he has a really big game, so he would probably be the one that I would prioritize over there on FanDuel. And then as far as cheapies go, let's go down here. We had some pretty decent ones yesterday / today. Justin Edwards, 4-1. Back in the starting lineup playing 20 minutes. Not great, but cheap enough to take at 4-1 and at least open up some things in your rest of your lineup. Sean Jones as a starter at 4-4. That's going to be some value that gives you some opportunities to open up the rest of your lineup. And then Keshawn George from Miami at 4-6. That's going to be a very highly owned play on FanDuel, and that is one that I would not recommend fading, especially with Pack already ruled out and a good chance that Cleveland is, if not out, limited. Because if you've got that severe flu, I got to tell you guys, man, it is a killer, and it takes you out in a hurry. So that's how I foresee the options being on FanDuel. You could also look to Norchad Omier, who is just, fantastic matchup proof, has great rates. Just 8.2 there. That's a doable price point. Miami mini stack could be the move with them again being supremely shorthanded, which has just been the case all year long. Renewed 6.9 on draft or on FanDuel, by the way, which is probably a little too high for him there, but only 6.1 on DraftKings, so a tough decision will have to be made. All right, let's go over to PrizePicks and then we'll giddy on out here. I got Saw on because I went on so late, so I'll have to remember that. This guy's always bowling at midnight and everything else. I don't know if I can only wish to be as active as you, man. All right, let's take a look here. I want to make sure these didn't change. We hit on some Texas Tech props today, by the way. That's pretty damn good. All right. Soriano, I don't like to take PRA much these days. I try to focus on fantasy points, which PrizePicks usually puts the morning of the slate. But the Soriano PRA number is sticking out to me here against Georgetown, 22.5. I just feel like a 15 and 12 double-double is in line. Maybe he'll get more, but it just seems like he should coast into that. So I am leaning into the over 22.5 PRA. Let's see. We got Drake and Belmont on here. Look at that. We will get the fantasy points in the article tomorrow when they drop. They had some pretty good ones. Although Wade Taylor, I know, didn't hit today. Juwan Gary over 17.5 PRA. Just like that spot for him against Indiana either way. And then let's go to the point total here. All right, Coleman Hawkins over 13.5 points versus Penn State. It's just DVP. Come on now. It's 20.5 points for Shannon, so I can't really touch that, although it wouldn't shock me for him to hit that. And then Domask at 16.5. So just take the Hawkins at 13.5. If you think Guerrier is going to get closer to 30 minutes today, over 8.5 points makes sense there for him as well. I do like Mark Mitchell over 13.5 points versus Miami. Nice little bounce back spot for him. And then let's see these Cincinnati numbers so we can get an advantageous look. Seamus Lucucius under 11.5 points would also be another one that I would be on. All right, so that is it. Just kind of reiterating there, you know, there is a path to balance here, but the pay-ups are so good on this slate that you almost have to just take some of these shots on values, whether that's Chico Carter, Jamion Keller from Oklahoma State, who might be a big play for me at 4-4, or even Chase Ross at 4-2 for Marquette. There's definitely the ability to make a stars and scrubs lineup. Some of those values, like I said, maybe they get 2.5 to 3x, but if that pay up that you got, you know, going up to Oso, for example, and he puts up a 40, that'll more than make up the Chase Ross, you know, 8, which I do think he puts up a better number than that. All right, I appreciate everybody who tuned in live. If you're checking out on demand, please make sure you leave a comment and drop a like. It really helps the videos. We'll be back Friday night, a little bit earlier, 9 p.m. PST instead of starting a little bit later. And then we will be having in just 2 weeks a new schedule where we'll be doing Monday, Tuesday, Friday as usual, but also we'll be throwing in a Wednesday night show and then a Saturday night show / Saturday in the day for the night slate into Sunday. But we'll talk more about that here in the next couple of weeks. March Madness is going to be here before you know it. Still queues for the Mania. Get in if you can. Thanks, guys. Take care, and I'll see you guys on Friday.